Starting with the carving of all anterior permanent teeth, the common factor that we will be doing is dividing, as we spoke earlier, dividing the crown and the root as per the length measured or the measurement given in the textbook. We've marked the sides, but here I've marked it as labial since I'm using an anterior tooth. So going to make an anterior tooth, so labial for the labial surface. If it is for posterior, we do have used the term buccal, palatal, mesial and distal. So mark the sides. After that, I'm dividing the labial surface, the crown portion, into 3 equal halves. So cervical third and the middle junction between the middle and the incisal third. So I've divided it into 3 parts. Likewise, I would like to draw a line through the center from distal crossing the incisal all the way to the mesial. So this is a central point of the block. I'm marking it on the distal all the way from the root or from the base all the way to the incisal, and then finally making it to the mesial side. So this is the center of the block, demarcating the center of the block or the long axis from mesial. This is now the mesial side I'm talking about, crossing the incisal and also on the distal. So this is a reference point that I have marked from mesial, incisal, distal. Okay. The next step that we are going to follow is to cut the block from the mesial or from the distal aspect, marking a line from the junction, this is the labial aspect, from the junction of the cervical and the middle third. There's a line here. I'm extending a line onto the mesial or the distal side. This is the distal side, and I'm making a line all the way almost up to the line drawn through the center of the block, but don't come to that line. Leave a gap and just cut the block straight down. Now the purpose of this is to get the crest of curvature. Alright, so it has not yet reached that line at the center. Try and keep it. If you had kept it further also, it's much better. Now the next step is to converge the block towards the palatal side. So we know that in the lateral incisor, the cingulum is well centered. So I draw two lines equidistant from the mesoincisal and the distoincisal angle towards the cervical, towards the lingual or the palatal aspect. Now, placing my lacrons onto this surface, just cut it straight down. Be very careful. You can go outwards, but please don't go inwards. Same thing on this side. Just cut it straight down up to the cervical line. So I've converged the block to the palatal side. So this is the labial, this is the convergence to the palatal. Now the first step that I had given the cut from here so that the crest of curvature here comes in the cervical third. So that was the purpose of this first cut that we gave. Now, the next step would be to get the convex outline, or the concave outline of the cingulum, of the lingual fossa, to get the concave outline of the lingual fossa. So dividing the crown again into a cervical third and middle third on the palatal aspect, this is a palatal aspect. I will then remove the wax from the junction from the cervical and middle third. I remove the wax in a curved manner. Now, some people find this curving it or scooping it out in a curved concave manner difficult. So what you can do is, just as we did on the label surface, mark the junction and just cut it straight, and gradually you can curve it. Once we finish that, I'm just extending it to the cervical line. Okay. Now you can see that this has an angle here and an angle here. So we can round off the cingulum area by just smoothly running the lacrons around the angles, only on the cingulum area. Now if you notice, when I'm doing the cingulum area, I'm going from the cervical to the incisal. Now whenever I'm doing any other, the proximal sides, whether it's a mesial or the distal side, I should never take the lacrons from the cervical to the incisal. If I do that, the whole block will converge towards the incisal. So it will converge to the incisal. I don't want that. I don't want it to become a peg-shaped lateral. So I have to place my lacrons on the incisal and bring it towards the cervical if I want to get that convergence towards the cervical. Now I'll leave it at this point now. I'll mark the length of the root. So we know that the length of the root is around 13 millimeters. So mark the length of the root and then place. Now I'll just show you this step till now. So what has happened now, you can see there is a ledge created here and a ledge created here. There is no ledge on the label surface yet. So this excess of wax that is created here, I'm going to remove it straight to the point of the root. So keeping my lacrons on the surface, just take it straight down. Don't go inwards, you can go outwards, because if you remove the wax too much, then you cannot add wax later. Similarly on the other side. It's very important that you take proper support when you are doing the carving. Okay, so you need to take proper support. So this, what I'm using is a pen grip. So I'm taking proper support. And I'm moving it straight up to the base of the block. So here we have the base of the block. Now what I need to do, you can see that I've removed it only on the palatal aspect and a part of the mesial and distal surfaces. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to converge the block apically. We know that the root converges apically And in the lateral incisor, it goes in a distal direction. The apical third moves in a distal direction. So this is my distal, so I will remove a little more excess on the mesial side at the apical third. I'm keeping the block bulky, so the root is bulky as much as possible till I get the cervical carving. Now this is the mesial side. I'm also going to remove from the apical portion, little from the mesial side also. And you know that the tip of the incisal tip is in line with the tip of the root. So keeping this as my reference point, I'm going to remove the wax from the labial apical third. Now don't remove excess wax now, because you need to remove it when you're doing the finishing. And also from the palatal third. Apical third on the palatal side. Now gradually I'll just converge the block from the cervical to the apical, converging it lingually also. So from the labial side, I'm converging it to the lingual, as well as on the mesial side, I'm converging it also from the cervical to the apical. Now when I'm converging it, I'm making sure that I'm converging the block simultaneously towards the lingual. You have to make sure that when you're moving the wax, you have to remove it in a very smooth fashion. There should be no irregularities finally. Now these two angles, this angle formed here between the mesial and the labial surface on the root, I'm going to round it off. Now when I'm rounding it off, I will not round it from the mesial to the labial, but rather from the labial I will round it to the mesial. Now the reason why I'm doing it from labial to mesial is so that the root converges towards the lingual. If I did it from the mesial to the labial, the whole block would converge towards the labial. So I don't want that to happen. Similarly, starting again from the labial, I'm going towards the distal. So I'll leave it at this stage now. I'll not do too much of removing now, because I need to do the cervical carving, which is going to give the final shape to my full carving. So I remove all the excess wax equally around the base. Now this main step now is to carve the cervical line. So I'll mark the cervical line labially. I'll mark the cervical line labially. Okay. You can measure it and mark it. Gradually we can reduce the size. You can keep it a little longer now. So I've marked the cervical line labially. Now keeping this point, that is the most convex portion of the labial outline, as a reference point, I'll take a line all the way onto the distal, crossing the palatal, going onto the mesial and coming back to the labial. So it should be the same line. This is my reference line now. Now on the mesial side, the block dips in by about 3 millimeters. So I will mark 3 millimeters. So I'll take my divider. I'll take my divider. On my scale, I would measure about 3 millimeters. So I would mark 3 millimeters with the divider. And then mark it here from this reference point. Similarly, 2 millimeters on the distal. So if I see again, I'll take 2 millimeters and I'll mark it on the distal also. Now, keeping that as my reference point, I will take my cervical line, draw my cervical line on the mesial, dipping in, coming back to the cervical line on the palatal, and this is my reference point here. Starting here, it should go to the 2 millimeter mark and come back to the cervical here. Now, I will remove the wax now following the outline I have given. So I have given the outline on the distal and on the mesial. So I will place my lacrons flat on the surface on the mesial side and remove my wax as per the outline. So this is mesial outline. Now distal outline, I need to remove a little more wax than I did on the mesial. So sorry, I've slipped, my hand slipped. Take it all the way to the palatal. Take it all the way to the palatal. Now since it's bulky, I can do as much of my cervical carving as possible. If I had reduced it, no, that wouldn't have been possible. So I'm removing from the label aspect also, following the convex outline I've given. Now we've removed the wax as per the cervical outline that we have given. So all throughout, keeping the lacrons flat, we have removed all throughout, everywhere. Now it's a bulky carving, so we can remove as much wax as we want because the dimensions have to reduce. So you can see there's a ledge created here, both sides. Okay, so now what we have to do, we know that the label surface is convex, so we're going to make this convex by rounding it off here. Just keep the lacrons flat and just round it off, make it convex. So the whole label surface will be convex. We want the whole label surface as convex. So this is our crest of curvature here that we are creating on the label side. Now this is my distal side. Distal side, I want the crest of curvature to come in the middle of the middle third. So what I'm going to do, I'll place my lacrons here. Where the excess wax is, I will just remove it curved like this from the crown portion. So from the crown portion, I just remove it curved. So what I've got is a curved outline here. Now I want the crest of curvature to be here. So I know my incisor here in the lateral is curved. So I will give it a curve there also. So following this outline, I've kept the crest of curvature. I want it to be in the middle of the middle third. However, on the mesial side, I'll just keep my lacrons flat like this and just converge it towards the incisor. So keep the lacrons flat and converge it all the way to the lingual. So I've got a relatively straight outline here and a convex outline here. I can make it slightly convex now by converging it towards the cervical from the crown portion. So I get the convergence here. Here I've got a round outline. Now I have to reduce the block as much as possible. Now on the labial side, I will give a convex outline by reducing it at the angles, mesial and distally. I'm not keeping it flat here like it was in the central incisor. I'm giving it more of convexity. Now, I need to converge it to the lingual also, to the palatal, whatever excess wax is there. And we know that the cingulum is well centered here, so converge the block. So this is starting from the labial, bring it all the way to the palatal. Not so much on this distal side, because we want that crest of curvature in the middle of the middle third on the distal side. Mesio-incisal angle also will round it slightly. Now we need to reduce the root. Now you can see that the root is sticking out here and it's bulky. So there's more wax removed here and this is bulky coming out. So I will reduce the root all the way from the cervical towards the apical, because we know that the root converges to the apical. And as it converges, the apex of the root is towards the distal. So we have to make sure we don't remove so much from the distal apically as we are going to remove from the mesial apically. Same thing on the mesial. The bulky portion, I'm removing it off first. Now we know that the tip of the root should be towards the distal, so from the mesial side I will remove more apically. From the labial side, go all the way to the mesial. Now this is just thin shavings now. From the labial towards the mesial. and converge it towards the palatal. I'm just taking thin shavings now. I've finished with the gross cutting and I'm just giving the shape now. Similarly on the distal, I still feel there's a little bulk here, so I will just remove the bulk a little from the middle portion. Be careful that your lacrons doesn't get caught in the wax and remove excess of wax. Give the convergence also from the palatal side. So I'm just flattening the block, the base, so that it doesn't look uneven finally. So in the finishing process, you can see it's only thin layers of wax that I'm removing. Thin, not cutting too much of wax, just running the lacrons to make it smooth throughout. Now you can redefine the cervical line throughout to get that shape again, to reinstate the shape properly. When you're doing this, make sure the lacrons is flat. We don't want to make a deep ditch there. What we want is to get the outline. So it's a be very careful, and also take your time to do these steps. Don't be in a hurry, otherwise finally, especially in these last steps, we don't want the root to break. So I'm giving that distal tilt by removing more from the mesial apical region. So you can see when I did that, we are getting a sort of a distal tilt of the apex. Now just above the distal half here, I can give a sort of a concavity here, so that it will look like it's going in a distal direction. So just above the, somewhere in the middle third, lower middle third, if I divide it into three parts, that's the apical portion, the middle third and the cervical third. Just above this line, I'm giving it a slight concavity to get that effect of a distal tilting of the root. So I get a slight appearance of a distal tilting of the root. Now smoothen it there. Remove all the roughness. just highlighting the cervical line again. Now my dimensions are more, so gradually I have to reduce the dimension. So I have to bring the carving into dimension by gradually reducing the size. So it's always better to start from larger size and go to the required size or the dimensions as per the odontometric data given in the textbook. Make it convex at the cervical line so that we get the crest of curvature in the cervical third. So I'm just smoothing it as per the outline so that I get a proper finish. Now basically what I've done here is I've given you the steps. You need to carve it into dimension. For that you can gradually finish it in the dimension. So I will finish it in dimension and I'll show it to you. So just keep on going until you get the final finish from all aspects. Okay, now I've got the tooth into dimension now. I've removed all the wax as per dimension. Now what I need to do is the final step, which is the carving of the lingual fossa. So here, the carving of the lingual fossa. Now in the carving of the lingual fossa, it's different from that of the central incisor. In the central incisor we made a W-shaped area, but here we are going to carve it in a sort of a V-shaped. And the lingual fossa here is more deeper than, it's more well bound, so more prominence of the mesial marginal ridge, distal marginal ridge, the cingulum and the linguo-incisal ridge. So using the backside of my lacrons in this V-shaped area, I'm going to remove the wax, make it more concave so that the marginal ridges become more prominent. So here you can see there's a concave area created which corresponds to the lingual fossa. Okay, so if I want I can finish it off slightly with the lacrons. Now I have to remove all the loose wax from the surface so I can see what has happened there. Now you just use your gauze piece and just smoothen out all the surface, all the roughness. Now if you've seen, I've left that line so that when I finally polish it, it comes like a proper finish there. Remove all the loose wax. Polish it off with your gauze piece so that all the roughness goes. You need a smooth surface. Now before you do any of the polishing, what you have to do with your lacrons is that you have to remove any roughness that is there with the lacrons. So the lacrons will remove the first roughness that has, so you just see fine lines. It should not be irregularities when you finish using the lacrons. It should not be irregularities. I'm putting a link for the PDF for steps in carving. It is given in the description, so you can follow that also to understand the carving better. So what I would be doing is, now I would be polishing it and I would be posting the final pictures on the description. So this is the labial surface now. You can see the distal side is more convex. Mesio-incisal angle is also convex. The whole surface is convex also. This is the distal side. You can see that the long axis, this is the incisal, will be in line with the long axis of the root. Now this is the mesial side again. Here again from the mesial side, you can see that it is in line with the long axis. Now this is our palatal side, where we see the cingulum is the lingual fossa is very prominent because of the prominence of the ridges around it. So linguo-incisal ridge, the mesomarginal ridge, the distal marginal ridge, and the cingulum here. So it's confined within that space. So this is how you carve the lateral incisor from all aspects.